everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Redefining Society Podcast, but it's actually a new episode of a carbon, a silicon, and a cell walk into a bar with my co-host, guest, and, we kind of exchange role, I guess, here, and good friend, Bruce Wiley, Dr. Bruce Wiley. I know he likes avocados. I know he's a journalist. I know he has a lot of medical expertise and is involved in a lot of things when we come to healthcare and technology. And that's, as you can guess from the name of the show or the series, we're talking about human, we're talking about technology, computing, and we're talking about medicine. So welcome back, Bruce. So good to see you. You and the garlic in the back of your...
Yes, I figure, we have a carbon, we have a silicon. Might as well invite a garlic, a single garlic. Although you can see the garlic is a bit confused, concerned, because we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic today, right? Transhumanism.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And so I think this look on the garlic is a little anxious. But, there are myths and there are realities that we're going to talk about, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know. I mean, people watching the show, of course, on YouTube can see the very concerned garlic in the back.
Yeah.
The people listening, it's the face that I had pretty much the whole time listening to The Singularity is Nearer, the updated version of The Singularity is Near from Ray Kurzweil. And it's it's happening, apparently, according to him and according to a lot of news that we see around. And that's the face of, wow, that's cool. Wow, that's weird. I think that summarized the way I felt about it. And we'll have to pick some topics because there is too much. So it will be kind of like an ongoing conversation about the transhumanism thing.
I should add that garlic can be very good for you, but in moderation. You don't want to eat a ton of garlic right before a date, but
Yeah. On the other hand, you may want to have a bunch of garlic around your neck if you're going to Transylvania.
Yes,
and
exactly.
And you want to keep vampires.
Yeah, or if your date might be a vampire, but that's a different topic.
You never know. You never know. All right. Well, so I guess, I don't know. I know you're like me. I know that you spend your time thinking about what many people may consider some weird thoughts and say, why are you worried about this thing? Or why do you care about this thing? And when you dive into these and you start connecting the dots, I think it's a good thing to do, because we don't want to find ourselves with technology reaching its full potential and then realizing that, oh shit, I should have thought about that before. So I think people like me, you, and many, many, many other out there are considering guardrails and ethical thoughts. And again, guardrail, I think the guardrail, we're not going to stop technology, but we may be able to control it to where it's going. So your first thought on the whole concept of transhumanism, and maybe we give a little explanation about what it is.
Yeah, maybe we should define it for the garlic back here, because maybe the garlic is a little confused. You can never tell with garlic. Garlic may be confused because garlic is confused about the specific topic, or maybe it is even confused what it means. So we talk about transhumanism. It's the idea that technology can enhance what humans can do, even to the point where people, you make superhumans or humans that have capabilities that they didn't have previously. Now it's an interesting topic because one could argue that when the wheel was made, that allows humans to do things which they didn't do before. So it is kind of an open space. But I know, Marco, you mentioned about technology, and I think we've talked about this before. Technology in itself is neither good nor bad, right? You run into people say, "Oh, technology is awesome," or "Technology is awful," but it's really what technology can allow you to do. And it can allow you to do many good things, and it can allow people to do many bad things. So I think that's one of the things that we're talking about. Like, what are the different possibilities when it comes to the idea of transhumanism? How much altering what humans can do, or elevating, or whatever verb you want to use, is a good thing, and what aspects of it might be a not so good thing, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I mean, I like the fact that you mentioned the wheel, because I remember I was reading, well, actually, it was something that the late Steve Jobs said one time when he said he was reading about a research about who are the fastest and slower animals. And I like to say this, and some maybe people already heard it, but so obviously the man is not as fast as the horse, the human, as fast as the horse, as fast as, a condor that can fly, and how much energy actually they use when they do that. It was focused on kind of like the combination of the two. And in terms of energy, he said, well, if you put the man on a bike, then he goes on the top of the chain. Yeah. And it makes you think, and I like to think that way, how technology is an extension of our humanity, because we invented, we think about it, we created it, and then we adopt it. So the wheel, it's one thing, allowed to do a lot of things. But when we talk about genetic manipulation, uploading our brain into the cloud, and having artificial intelligence and robotics and nanotechnology, it's an all different level of technology. Yeah. So that's the one we're talking about. But I think historically, and as far as the history of humanity and humans, it's good to think about that too. The invention of fires, controlling and be able to start fires, and now it changed the way we eat, the way we defend from other animals, and so on. So it's...
Yeah, so I think one dimension when you're thinking about transhumanism is, the invasiveness of the technology, right? So something like the wheel, you're not actually strapping and attaching to your leg or body, and you can't like remove it or something like that. Whereas in some cases, you're talking about like highly invasive things. And then another dimension to talk about is, how things can be used and misused. In theory, there are many ways you can misuse a wheel. You can go and put a bunch of wheels on your friend's bed, and then the bed just starts rolling away or something of that sort. But when something is less invasive, then there's less of a dangers, or fewer dangers. They're still dangerous, but the more invasive something gets, the more concern there is in terms of things like side effects or privacy, or even things like control, so there's all those different types of dimensions. So again, the topic of transhumanism is broad, and it's also how you want to define it. So you'll find people, when they talk about, they're going to define it in different ways to different levels of invasiveness. But the actual dictionary definition is still fairly broad, where you're really sort of enhancing human capabilities using technology.
Yeah. One of the things, I think we can do this, Bruce. This episode is kind of like a general introduction of all the topics that are around this. And then I think in the next episode, we could kind of like focus more on some, like, again, integration with computer, expanding our intelligence, and creating, I don't know, another me. That's one thing that Kurt Ray talks about in the book, and how weird that may sound, but it also come out how we don't really know exactly yet how our brain is working. And we're say, hey, language learning model are working, because we try to mimic the brain. And they're amazing. ChatGPT is amazing, but we don't really know exactly how it works. So I feel like we're really playing with fire here, and that may be something that we want to touch on as a prelude to the next conversation. Like, are we really just going for it? And should we?
Yeah, that's an important point, because I think there can be a tendency to, naturally you want technology to move forward. Naturally you want things to improve and society to improve. But sometimes there can be a focus on certain things without thinking about what the consequences are, some of the unintended consequences are. Especially when we have, you mentioned ChatGPT, and that's that's in vogue, right? So people will say, oh, they talk to ChatGPT. But if you actually ask people, what is the basis of ChatGPT? How is it actually coming up with the answers? Many people are not going to be able to answer that, right? So, but you're having increasing reliance on ChatGPT. So people are talking about, having it write things for them, compose things for them, compose a poem. Someone will talk about composing songs and those things like that. But you have to really understand what the basis for that is, because then you can have a sense of where things could potentially go wrong. Similarly, if you're going to do something where you are taking an invasive step, you're planting something within the body, for instance, or you're changing something within the body, it is helpful to know, well, what else might you be changing, or what else might the consequences be? And that's not always discussed, because it's easy for you to kind of get very excited or caught up with like a single goal, right? So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, but it's very human. If we do most of the thing in our life, and we use technology, and we have no idea. I couldn't make a bulb, like a light bulb myself, but I use it every day, and I feel like it's part of who we are. So, but the difference is inside of your body and altering the way you feel. I mean, there is a lot of technology that help us to extend our life. I mean, 100 years ago or 150 years ago, that I think, I'm just throwing a number there, but the average lifespan was like 50, 60 years old. And in the Middle Age, of course, was even less, and was very hard. There was people living a long life, but it was more the exception than the rule. And now, because of medicine and technology and healthcare, we have extended that. So, but again, I don't think we realize that we're using already all this technology, and we just do so. And a lot of people talking about ChatGPT, statistically, when they do research and ask people, they're like, they think that he's already sentient. And
yeah,
truth is, it's just randomly putting probability together of what the next word sounds better. So when you say thank you, ChatGPT, because you think that one day could come after you, it kind of makes me laugh, and I do that. It's like, can you please tell me, instead of just go direct as it's just a computer,
Yeah, there's not a realization that it's sort of based on the corpus of knowledge that's out there, and then seeing what is associated. So if in theory you were to tell everyone, okay, just say the word chocolate after you say thank you, and everyone keeps doing that, eventually ChatGPT would do that, because it would associate chocolate with thank you. Mm-hmm. But of course, we know like you're welcome is associated with thank you. But yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned sort of a classic example is with X-rays. Obviously, X-rays have really helped the medical field. But there was a period of time when people started using X-rays to measure people's feet to fit shoes.
Really?
Until they realized, okay, that's not a good thing to expose people to radiation just every time they want to try on shoes.
I had no idea.
Yeah, so there's examples of that throughout where you get excited about something, and then you just kind of extend it in different ways. And unless you think about these things, you don't know what might happen. But yeah, I mean, if you think about, for instance, transhumanism, there's different things. People talking about implants, mechanical devices in humans, and so that's one thing. Two is people talking about somehow connecting different aspects of brains thinking with external devices or what have you, or people talking about like modifying genetics, or modifying different aspects of physiology, and those types of things. And each of these, I should emphasize, haven't sprung up magically within the last few years. They're actually the result of a steady evolution in these different areas. It's interesting because we tend to think there can be a tendency to think that these things jump out, just like AI and ChatGPT just suddenly jumped out in like the past 5 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. But no, it's been going on for a while. So if you think about it, the idea of using devices, for instance, with humans has been going on for years. You've got artificial valves, you've got, people, with artificial limbs. So different types of devices to facilitate human function. And in many cases, it started off, someone doesn't have a human function, or there's some type of human function either by birth or by accident was reduced or taken away. And so a lot of the initial devices were focused on trying to restore some of that or help enhance the function. And so, that has been more of a continuum. So, the argument that if someone has lost some function based on an accident, very few people will say, well, that person doesn't have a right to, try to restore some of that function. It's viewed as a positive thing. Right. But then if you start progressing and saying, well, what if you use devices to actually enhance human function? So I remember, for instance, there was that argument with the track runner from South Africa.
Yeah, South Africa. Sorry, yeah.
Oscar Pistorius, I think his name. He was using the blades.
Yeah.
And some of the people were arguing, well, those blades can actually allow you to run faster. So that became a discussion of whether that was actually something that would be considered an aiding device when it began as a device, because there was if someone didn't have a complete set of limbs. So we've really gotten here gradually, but what has really changed, I think, is awareness, and then the thought of how these can be extended. So that's become more common from a public standpoint, and then you start hearing these stories about, oh my goodness, So wanted to put that historical context with all these things out there.
Absolutely, and there was actually an interesting conversation I had last year before CES, and we were talking about how the internet, for example, took a long time to get in everybody's house because the infrastructure was not there and the computational power wasn't there, but it was there. I mean, let's not forget the internet goes back to the late 60s. So, again, it wasn't actually 96 or 97 when it became commercial viable. But then we were talking about how ChatGPT, it didn't take that long to get in everybody's hand. And the reason for it that I was explaining is because the infrastructure was already there. We already had this super powerful phone in our hands and computer that can run, in the cloud and then locally on your machine. So when this happened, it just used a highway that was already built. And so it went from 0 to million or billion of user in pretty much no time. And I think to what you said, that gave the idea that it was sudden But the truth is, Alan Turing was talking about that in the 50s, but we didn't have the computer power, the storage power, very expensive to add the type of computing that we needed. So it's the convergence of things, and I think it goes back to convergence of things now that happen so fast. And so my question, like, where do we draw the line between ethically acceptable, like you said, is fixing people, right, in medicine, versus this is transhumanism, because it's actually not fixing, but enhancing something that didn't need to be fixed. Is that where we could kind of cross the line, in your opinion?
Absolutely. I think that's an important thing to consider. And it's not necessarily an easy question to answer. But it's important to think about the different possibilities, as you mentioned, Marco, in advance, right? So you don't want to be in a situation, and we've seen this so many times, where technology or things change, and they change in a way where you don't really actually realize all the benefits of the technology, and they actually go in the wrong direction. We've seen that in some cases with social media. There are many benefits of social media, but then some of the other things got co-opted. And then, it was only a decade or so after social media became really popular where you started hearing these reports of negative aspects of it. So those discussions weren't really being had. And when that, the other concern is that, there's a lot of brain power naturally throughout the world. And ideally you want the brain power to focus on solving problems, not creating new ones. So, so if you can kind of think about like how some of these things can actually solve problems and not create new ones, I think it's better to do that in advance.
So you mentioned implants, and I think we could talk just to focus on something for the next 10 minutes. That's something it's on people's mind. It's in the news, of course. You got Elon Musk, but you got other player using a little less marketing, but they're still doing amazing things in terms of implant and helping people to walk again. We know that now with implants you can ease certain degenerative diseases like Alzheimer and I think Parkinson diseases you could control with electric stimulus, and everybody's fine with that, right? Again, so that's cool. You're welcome. I mean, you've got diabetes. I'm welcoming insulin and constant monitor system and a pump. So in a way, we're already transhuman in a way, but it's not actually enhancing. It's not making me think faster or better or enhance. So that people accept it. But I don't know if you can do one without the other, because we tend to do that as human. I mean, we tend to be Dr. Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, Dr. Frankenstein. I mean, I think it's a good analogy looking back at 100 years ago, and or more, when that was the idea was considered at that point.
Yeah. Well, we even have to even look at things like performance enhancing drugs, right? All those PEDs that people talk about with athletics. All those medications started off as medications to many of them to help treat conditions or diseases, but then you at some point you started having athletes use them to try to enhance their performance. So that's the analogy there. There's if someone has a disease or a condition and they need some type of steroids or whatever for it, then there's not an issue. But like if someone's using it to actually be able to run or faster or lift more things or be stronger, then there's the concern that means the playing field is no longer level. So we've seen examples of this in different ways, and also the tendency to take things a different step, a different level.
And that's what scares me. It's somebody that look at things from a sociological perspective and a human perspective. I think that that's just the way we are. And I don't want to sound negative, but that's what drives us as humans, and that's also, in a way, it's our blessing and our curse.
Yeah, and that's a very performance enhancing drugs is in many ways a quote unquote case study or foreshadowing, because you see all the same issues, right? So you see people say, and they work. You see people suddenly become very productive in sports. They suddenly start winning things. So it works. But that there's many situations where over longer periods of time, taking those medications or those drugs is bad for your health. Mm-hmm. And so not only does it potentially make the playing field unlevel, it also can have consequences to the person taking those things. But they're not thinking. They may be thinking like, I can win the gold medal if I can do this. I can win such and such championship, or it could be a Hall of Fame or whatever if I take this. But they don't realize over a long time they're actually sacrificing their health. And I think there's some similar situations here where you don't have the long-term data on how some of these approaches that are being discussed, what the impact might be. And so the risk-benefit ratio is different if you have a problem, if you have a medical issue that's preventing your functioning. So just like, one extreme is, a lot of cancer medications, like chemotherapy agents. They have very severe side effects in many cases, right? But, the goal is you want to get rid of the cancer cells so people are willing to tolerate higher, worse side effects. So there's that balance. So if you are trying to treat a condition, then you might be willing to tolerate the side effects or the problems that arise. If you get to a point where you're not actually trying to treat a condition, but you're trying to enhance your situation, then the risk-benefit ratio changes, right? You don't need that. So you may not necessarily be willing to or should tolerate the potential risks of doing something. And in order to determine the risks, you need data, right? You need information on what's going to happen over time with a particular technology, and that's not always known. That takes time to actually generate. So that's something to keep in mind.
The other thing to keep in mind is that different people, and we talk about that in cybersecurity all the time, have different level of comfort with risk.
Yep.
Right? And fuck it, I'm not going to buy a car insurance. If it happen. What is the chance that it's going to happen? Other people, I'm going to get the best insurance because if it does happen, I don't want to find myself in trouble. And then, that you leave the door open or you close the door, lock it 3 times, or put the alarm system. And the truth is that, and I'm not realizing that more and more, is that there is not a human common denominator. Humans are very different one with the other, like values and virtues, and they change with history, they change with cultures. They, what is a virtue today wasn't a virtue in the Middle Age. It was more of a virtue to kill someone because offended your princess or something like that. And now you're like, no, you're more virtue if you don't actually do that. So things change, and the big question is, who makes those decisions for everybody else? So if you want to go philosophical, I think that's a big question. Like, what is the level of the rights, the human rights that are unalienable, or something like that. So that's the other thing. I think that's why sometimes we go to the point where we just can't stop it or think it before, because I don't think we can all agree, and technology is not going to wait for everybody to agree, especially when there's money involved into the equation, and you want to be first on market, and kind of like technology back in the 90s and 2000. Let's break everything and then let's see what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think an analogy is, what's constantly faced with, when it comes to food and things like that, right? So you don't necessarily go around and dictate to everyone that you should eat this. Like, you don't walk over and says, you slap down what they're eating and say, no, you should eat this instead, right? But an approach that has been taken historically is there is a need for transparency, right? There's a need for labels and those things like that, so people actually know what they're eating, so that they can make quote unquote informed decisions, that they actually have the information in front of them if they want it, and that they can use that information. The dangers are when you don't have that information, when you don't know what the consequences of something might be, and you're making a non-informed decision. So I think, realistically, to have like one set of rules for everyone and say, you will just do this, nothing but this, that's not realistic, because you're absolutely right. There's different people have different situations. I might have a need to have garlic over my shoulder. Other people might say, well, that's ridiculous. So I guess part of it is there are some things that everyone will mutually agree is bad, right? So like, don't eat cinder blocks. Might be an example. I don't think too many people will say, no, I have a right to eat cinder blocks. I want to eat as many cinder blocks as I want to, right? So they would say, okay, that's not good because that's gonna, that's harmful to your health. So part of it is saying, what are the things that are going to be universally bad that we know are just things that shouldn't be done? Okay, so then there's that. Then there's a whole continuum of things, like you said, that will depend on people's situations. So then it is helpful to really kind of know what are the pros and cons, what are the risks, benefits, and those things like that, so people can make informed decisions. Mm-hmm. And if we think about that, we do it all the time with a lot of things. Technology shouldn't be different. So I've heard people argue that, well, technology is complex and not everyone can understand technology. But actually, I don't know. I believe that everyone out there actually, if it's explained in the right way, if it's explained without using like 50 million pieces of jargon, can actually understand what a lot of these things do. So I think that's part of it. Helping people really understand what each of these things actually do.
Yeah, and I think you made a really good point. You don't need to know how to build it. You don't need to know how to build the car, but you gotta know how to drive it.
Yep. Or
you're gonna be dangerous for other people. And if you go in the street, that's why we have driver license and. Yep. And you don't just get in the car and say, all right, how does this thing go? Let me figure that out. Which is what we do actually with technology most of the time, because it doesn't even come with manual anymore. I remember I would buy like an hi-fi system as a teenager. That was the big technology growing up, like in the 80s, or the VHS or that kind of stuff. And you're like, all right, look at the manual or, play around. But I wasn't hurting anybody, maybe my ear, if I were playing too loud.
Yeah.
And now we're on a whole another level of technology, and we're using this phone, we give it to kids, and we don't even know ourselves what really you can do with it. So that basic knowledge, I don't want you to build it. I don't need to invent the light bulb. It's already there, but I need to know how to turn it on and off. And if it flickers, maybe I want to change it. Maybe it's going to get the house on fire or something like that. So I agree with you, like that basic understanding that can allow people to make decisions. And not everybody's going to care. But I'm feeling good about the majority would make educated decision. And that I think that's where the public opinion comes in when legislators are going to go and tackle the guardrail we were talking at the beginning.
It's interesting. I was unpacking the other day, like some computer hardware stuff in some bags, and they put in plastic bags. And so the plastic bag comes with a warning that you shouldn't put it on your head, right? Shouldn't put it on your head because you might suffocate.
Yeah.
Which I said, okay, I'm glad they told me that, because that's what I was going to do, put it on my head.
Yeah.
So you have some things that yeah, you have some things that have warnings, but then other things don't, right? Like some other things you have no idea what the risks might be. So there is a imbalance where you have excessive amount of warnings about certain things, and then other things, the people are a lot less aware of. So.
Yeah, I remember one time when I, bought a candle years and years ago, and don't put it near draperies because they may get on fire. No shit. Or, like the same thing you just mentioned. It's like, this is common sense, but somebody did it, right?
Yes.
Somebody did many people probably put that on their head, and maybe kids. And therefore, the lawyer has to come in and force that company to do that. Or, when people burn themselves at the Starbucks coffee and now they got to put the sleeves, and it's like, dude, really? You didn't know the coffee was going to be hot?
No, I remember a number of years ago, I worked in the emergency room. All you need to do is work in the emergency room for a certain period of time to realize that people will try anything with anything. So.
Yeah, that I guess is a life-changing experience.
Yes,
change your perspective on things for sure.
So every time you see a warning, you know that someone somewhere did that. So
but there's not a warning on social media again where it says what you see in your feed may or maybe not true, or may or maybe not a bot, because 50% of the internet traffic, it is actually non-human, and people get offended because some bot troll them, and just let it go. But maybe if you knew that, you wouldn't do it. So, well, I really enjoy this conversation. I'm so glad that we got back together with our series in the bar. I'm so glad you brought the garlic with you, because it's been a reminder of, to me at least, looking at it and you all the time, that you need to be a little bit concerned sometimes, and then maybe you relax after. Maybe start with a question mark. That's the garlic lesson right here. And once you understand, maybe you can start doing and using technology. That would be a good lesson.
Yeah, I think the garlic is still, as you can see, a little concerned. There's a concerned expression there. And I think one of the reasons why the garlic is still concerned is, I think we've talked about some of the issues with transhumanism, but there's also a lot of deeper dives that we can take and other things that we can discuss, almost as a preview for our next series of episodes. There's many other things to talk about. So, we should take our cue from the garlic, that shouldn't necessarily be rest assured that it's a simple matter.
Yeah, definitely stay connected and tuned for the next episode when we dive in. And that could be, I'm just reading a few points: healthcare inequality in the age of singularity. Who is going to benefit the most of this advance in technology? That's something very dear to me. The human augmentation and ethical line that we kind of covered today, but also some more crazy stuff like uploading your brain in the cloud and have an extension of your brain, which is like a lot of people don't use, and probably neither I, the full extent of my brain. So why do I need another one full of terabyte of but that's another conversation we can have. And also, not just being critic. I mean, there is a lot of positive thing for the evolution of humanity. So I would say everybody stay tuned. I hope you enjoy our return in the bar with the carbon, the silicon, and the cell. And stay tuned, subscribe, and Bruce, thank you so much, you and the garlic. Maybe next time bring a garlic that change expression so you can, depending on what we talk about, we have a different reaction.
Well, it's really up to the garlic. As we talked about, we can give guide rails and, be transparent to the garlic, but ultimately the garlic decides. So.
It's all in the garlic mind, and his mind right now is still concerned, as it probably should. I think it's a good thing. All right, thank you, everybody. You'll find the link to connect with Bruce and all the incredible things that he does in his career and as a writer, as a journalist, and he's really funny too. So if you haven't figured that out with the garlic story, you may want to know him a little bit better. So stay tuned, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Same bar, same garlic, and different topic.